Welcome to Pearsall Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 417, a themed episode.
That's right, 417 episodes in, and this is our long-form Wednesday episode. Every Wednesday we drop an episode about an hour long or so, and these episodes rotate. One week we talk about updates in the reselling world, and then the following week we talk about some specific topic about reselling. So today we're going to be talking about something that impacts all of us, and that is the reality that reselling can be all-consuming. And so we want to talk about ways that we can ensure that reselling isn't completely consuming your life, right? It could be any job. Any job can do this, especially if you're an entrepreneur or you're high up in a company. Maybe not if you're just a 9-to-5, you clock in, you clock out, you're not taking any work home with you. But when it's your business, it's very easy to eat, breathe, sleep the business, and it can totally consume your life. And so we want to talk about some tips and tricks and strategies to kind of make sure that that's not something that you're doing. And I remember, I think we were off air the other week, Orlando, and you made a comment going back to some of our earlier podcasts where you made used to argue for the idea that you could be all in, 100% in on everything. Like you could be 100% on family life and 100% in on your physical like health and 100% in on reselling and 100% in on your spiritual health and 100% like. But the reality is you only have so much time, so much energy, so much to go around. It's a very limited resource, our life, So we want to make sure that you can still be successful, but not have every ounce of your life dedicated and focused to something at the expense of other areas.
And it's wild because that wasn't that long ago. That conversation I remember on the podcast was maybe like 5 years ago. That's a big difference. But that discussion was one of like we were in hustle mode, right? We were Pearsall Podcast, and I was like, I can do everything. Whatever you can do, you can just, if you're not doing it, it's because you're lazy. And I remember hustle culture can very much like enrapture you into this, like, I can definitely do all this. But the reality is you can't. And every circumstance is different. Now, if I was a 20-year-old kid and it was just me and I didn't have a wife or a girlfriend and I had no kids and, I was in my parents' basement, then yeah, sky's the limit in reselling. Like I could spend 24 hours a day if I was reselling, right? If I have no bills to pay, or even if I had a little bit of bills to pay, but I have this continual ability to do things, then yeah, if reselling consumes my life, that's okay, right? But the reality is for most of us, like reselling consuming our life will end up costing us. It could cost us, maybe our 9-to-5. It could cost us, time with our family in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah, I heard something recently and it kind of stuck with me, and it was this idea that the most successful people are the ones that find out efficient ways of doing things, and then they make it more efficient, right? Because really that's what it comes down to is you have a limited amount of time, right? That time has to be allocated to different things. And so if you can get your systems in place, and that's some of the things we're going to be talking about today, if you can get your systems in place to become as efficient as possible, and then every so often check, how can I make this more efficient? How can I do more in less time that allows you to allocate some of that time in other areas? And it could be allowing you to have even more time in reselling, right? If you're spending 8 hours a day reselling now and you become more efficient, you could then spend 9 hours a day and you're getting done maybe twice as much as you used to in the past. So you're not necessarily, giving anything up, but you're becoming more efficient. And one of the first things you can do is to create a schedule and then to be consistent, right? So many people, whether you're part-time or full-time, I've met a lot of resellers who are in both camps, and this is something that a lot of people struggle with because one of the things that reselling does is it provides a certain amount of flexibility to your life. Mm-hmm. If you're part-time, you're just using free time often. You're using that extra weekend here and there. You're using a little bit of time when you maybe have some downtime at your 9-to-5, or when you're, if you take public transit, maybe you're posting when you're on that. Like people find times to do things, but the problem is, and full-time people have even more flexibility. But the problem with the freedom that reselling gives you, as far as, hey, I can now have a little bit more control over the way I spend my time and the money that I'm bringing in, is it's easy to take that too far and to say, hey, you know what? I've got a whole week that I can get these listings done. I've got this death pile. I'll get to it eventually. And, I can do some sourcing. I've got all week to do sourcing. So maybe I'll go out, to some thrift stores today, but you know what? I slept in today. So maybe I'll go later this afternoon. And if you're not consistent and you don't have a set schedule, you're going to find that you're constantly making excuses. I've used the analogy in the past from, one of those old self-help books of Eat the Frog, find the most difficult thing to do first. If for you it's listing, then maybe before you go sourcing that day, even if it's like a Saturday morning and you want to get to garage sales at 6 a.m., maybe wake up an extra half hour early and say, okay, I'm going to do my 5 listings before I even leave, and make some kind of a schedule and be consistent about it. Because if you do that and you realize, hey, I locked in 3 hours on this day for sourcing and 1 hour on this day for listing, and I've locked in some time for shipping, and my Tuesday looks different than my Wednesday because my kid has soccer practice or whatever your situation is. But if you're very consistent with that, you'll find you're actually getting more done quicker and you're freeing up time. You're not constantly in the back of your head like, oh, I still have to go sourcing. I still have to do those listings. Yeah. And then you're going to end up pushing that off. And then when you do end up doing the listing, it's when it's like, well, my kid has a game, but I haven't got this done and I haven't done. And you're not in control of your own schedule. You've got to control your own schedule.
And I'll give you, and by the way, I don't know if we titled this episode, so if you're still listening, it's about don't let reselling consume your life, right? And the reason Mike and I like talk about this is because I can tell you from my own experience, like reselling for a while consumed my entire life. And it was just because like you said, I had all this time freedom. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to list when I want. I'm going to source when I want. Like, I'll be good. And remember when I went to full time, I didn't have like a huge store. I remember I had like 1,300 items. I have about 3,000 right now. But at that time, eBay was pushing. Things were good. This was 2018, 2019. Like, it didn't take a lot of heavy lifting to get sales on eBay as long as you bought stuff, that sold in good time and you ended up being a top-rated seller and all that. But I remember I had no schedule, right? So before I knew it, like, I would take my sweet time doing things, right? I would take my sweet time listing, going, I don't have to answer anybody. So I would, I'd end up taking pictures at one point. And I'm like, you know what? I'll finish this later. Or, I got a bunch of death piles, but who cares? Like, I have all the time in the world. Like, I can take care of these death piles, whenever I want. And before you know it, you have death rooms. Like, it sounds terrible, but you have rooms full of death piles. Right. And it consumes not even like your time, but it consumes your living space. And then before you know it, you end up losing stuff. So you end up spending a bunch of time trying to find stuff because you're like, oh, I don't need to organize that. I don't need to put a custom SKU label. Yeah, I'll take care of it later. And next thing you know, you're losing stuff and you're spending all this time trying to find stuff. And so I want to be very clear, especially if you're full time. And those of you that are new full time, comment here. Let us know. Like, did you start scheduling yourself? Did you force yourself to have a time when you list? Did you force yourself to have a time like when you ship? Like, do you ship twice a day? And when you do, what are those times? Have you forced yourself to say, hey, I'm only sourcing during these times and I'm not going to source anymore until I list these items?
Yep.
And
it's like the
again,
old.
I haven't arrived. I'm just letting people know.
It's like the old Jocko Willink, discipline equals freedom, right? Yeah. The more, if you're disciplined about it, you're going to have freedom in that area. All right. Our next one here is you want to keep your listings accurate and detailed enough. And enough is the key word there, right? Sometimes people spend way too much time trying to make the absolute perfect listing, and they end up getting kind of action. They freeze up. They don't take any action at all. And the reality is, sometimes it's better to take the best picture you can in the moment, do as much research as you can, and get that item listed. Now, if it's like some rare, unique thing, like one of Orlando's railroad lanterns, like maybe it's worthwhile spending a little bit of extra time doing some research and having the right details in there. But the reality is 10 listings that are a 9 out of 10 are better than one listing that's a 10 out of 10, right? If you're making sure, and what I mean by that is like even thinking of things like pictures. Like we always talk about, you have to have a great listing. You need to have good pictures. You need to have, if there's any kind of wear, you need to mention those things. But some people go into paragraphs into the description about every little thing, right? If it's got
AI
cosmetic wear, and AI can help with some of that, to be honest. But some people will spend too much time that they get action paralysis, right, or decision paralysis. They don't actually do anything because it's such a burden. But if you realize, hey, you know what? If I can get 10 listings done in maybe 75% of the time that I used to do 10 listings, you're much more likely to get 10 listings done. Even if that means you're not putting quite as much time and energy into each one. Does that make sense, Orlando? Is what I'm saying?
No, it does. No, I agree. Like, you need to have, we talk about this later on, but you need to have some kind of systems in place, because you got to know, okay, I'm going to sell similar. Like, that's an easy one, right? You're going to sell similar everything, right? You're going to find a similar one. You're going to take the same amount of pictures for every item, right? You're not going to like try to find, unless it's something like you said, the railroad lantern or something very unique. Like, for every shoe, this is exactly how you're going to do your pictures, right? For every video game, this is how you're going to do your pictures. These are items that you're going to test. These are items that you're not going to test. Like, there has to be a system in place. Now, the other side I wanted to talk about was make sure that you're accurate in the sense that, like, clothing, right? There's people all the time that debate this, and I don't know why this is debate, but they're like, oh, you don't have to put measurements. Now, there is a part where you can maybe make the argument, if you have that slick ruler where you're able to do the armpit to armpit and you're able to do the hem from, top of the shirt to the bottom with the ruler and put that in pictures, that's fine. But if you have zero measurements and you sell a lot of clothing, you're going to be consumed in messages. Like, why not spend the time the first time putting those messages and you never have to do that again, right? Or you have an item that weight matters, right? Weight is important. So let's say it's a duck decoy, or let's say it's a decoration for a home, or something. Like, people want to know the weight. So just put the weight, because what I find is most of my messages when I was doing clothing was always a measurement. My biggest fault, for example, right now I have a message. They've messaged me 3 times, and I've just been super busy. But it's always like, what is the heel of that cowboy boot? Well, most of the time you're not going to get that message, but you will get it a few times. And if you are selling hundreds of these items, you're going to get that message many times. So that's what I mean about make sure your listing is accurate. Make sure you have the info there, that you're not going to have to spend time in messages, because you're going to feel very overwhelmed if every day you're getting a message about a measurement, a weight, just have something. And you know what? I wanted to add something to this that's not on our on our notes here. Have templates ready. That's the next thing we should talk about here. You get messages all the time, right? You'll get messages about, like, how does this size up? Does it feel larger than usual? Does it fit smaller? Or you may get questions about how comfortable is this item. Like, one of the templates I use all the time is like, hey, thanks so much for reaching out. Unfortunately, everybody has their own different preferences when it comes to how things fit. So unfortunately, I'm unable to give you an exact answer to your question. And it's in my Google Keep, and I just copy paste it every time. If I have a send offer, I have a copy paste template ready to go. If it's a return, I have a copy paste. If it's something that's an item, for example, like I'm out of stock, right? Like I thought I sold something, and then I look and it's like, whoa, it already sold, and somehow it ended up back in my listing. I have my apologies, this item was sold already, and somehow it ended up listed again. I'm sending you a 20% coupon for anything in my store. Please know, your business is important to me. Again, my apologies. Copy paste every single time instead of having to retype it. And think about how much time you're saving by having these templates ready to go every single time.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I use a lot of that too, as far as I used to use Evernote to store a lot of my stuff, and they kind of changed their model, and it makes it a little bit harder. But yeah, Google Keep's a good option. Even a Google Doc somewhere or something like that where you can easily access. Now, again, it comes down to efficiency, right? If you're spending a minute and a half looking for where do I keep that Google Doc that has that message that would have taken me 30 seconds to type up, you're really not saving any time. So it comes down to, can you make the system efficient? Some people are almost too literal with things. Like, they're going to hear what we're saying, and they're going to try and develop a system that's actually going to cost them time in the long run. So you've got to figure out, if I'm going to do this, how can I make sure it's easy for me? Okay, do you have it where you can quickly click on it? Is it like a favorite on your phone that you can quickly access? get to it, and then you're good to go. And that's very useful, especially when you've got, like you said, sometimes long responses for things. But yeah, for those consistency, it is very useful to have that. And like you said, sometimes, so yeah, I gave one side of the coin, right? Of like, don't spend too much time trying to make the perfect listing. But yeah, some people go the other end of the spectrum and they provide too little detail, and you're stuck with answering questions. And yeah, spending an extra 2 minutes on that listing could have saved you 15 minutes in the long run. So yeah, make sure you got to find that happy medium where you don't have diminishing returns either direction on that.
Yeah.
Now our next one.
So can I add
Go ahead.
one more thing?
Yeah, go for it.
So with the use of templates, right? The reason I'm a strong advocate of using templates is that it allows you not to get emotionally involved in the discussion, right? Because sometimes you'll get somebody that's they're just rude, right? They're like, "Oh, I can't believe you send me this. This is trash." Right. And then you end up spending like a half hour trying to put together a response when your response should be like, "I'm so sorry it didn't work out. Please know you're able to get a free return label at the link below. Thank you so much for your business. Here's a 20% coupon for anything in my store if you want to do that. And please know, and then, once I receive it and look it over, you'll receive a refund." Right. You're not spending multiple paragraphs explaining to them why something is messed up. You're not spending multiple paragraphs trying to defend yourself. You have that template. Copy and paste, takes the emotion out of it, and it saves you a ton of time, so you're not consumed by these messages.
That's right. All right. Our next one here, man, Orlando, I feel like you're the poster child for this one.
I am.
But it's staying up to date on your bookkeeping, right? And again, this can go back to that idea of a schedule. If you don't schedule things, there's a good chance it doesn't happen, right? Now, you could just out of habit know, like, oh, I need to do this or I need to do that, and so you end up doing it. But for the most part, if you say, you know what, every Monday morning at 8:30, or maybe it's 7 o'clock at night before I go to bed, or whatever it is, I'm going to go through this previous week's expenses. I'm going to pull up, what's sold. I'm going to do my bookkeeping as far as my mileage. I'm going to make sure that's entered. Any business expenses. I bought some bubble wrap. Okay, let me enter that. And you're going to want to use some kind of business software. We'll talk about My Reseller Genie, which is our favorite for taxes. But if you schedule that time in, I mean, honestly, if you spend 15 minutes once a week going through your expenses, making sure everything is up to date, you're pretty much going to be done when it comes to tax time. Mm-hmm. We're talking 15 minutes. We spend more time than that scrolling through social media pretty much every day, multiple times a day. It's like 20, 30 minutes can be gone just looking at some Insta Reels or TikToks or whatever you're on. And if you're just like, hey, once a week, I'm going to spend 15 minutes and just make sure I've updated. Because a lot of times we have software that's doing some of the stuff for us. Okay, my card, I'm using my business card, and it in my business account, it's already showing me what my business, this went to food, or this went to gas, or this. So a lot of that stuff is already kind of being tracked, but just making sure you've got it where you need to have it. Everything is accurate. Maybe you need to move an expense over. Maybe while you were at the gas station and got gas, some of that was, money was spent on food, and the tax write-off for food is a little bit different than it is for gas. And so are you marking those things so that way it's easy to tell what's expenses, what's not expenses, what's items you've sourced. 15 minutes a day versus you're going to sit down one day to do taxes because taxes are going to be due in a week or two for you. And you sit down for 8, 9, 10 hours going through documents, going through paperwork, finding this, finding that, pulling reports. And it's just miserable.
No, everything that you're saying in my head, I'm like, yeah, I feel every single thing that you're saying, because that is, I would say, for a lot of people, bookkeeping is what will keep them away from reselling. Like they'll be okay selling a few items here and there, being part-time, but then, when they realize that, they have to pay taxes on stuff, they realize that they end up having to, file their taxes. They realize that they end up having to track mileage and have deduction, all this. Like some people are like, you know what? I don't know if I want to do all this. And we've actually had people in the past tell us that like, if, I remember at one time, I think they changed it, right? There used to be that $600 threshold that at one time the government was trying to push, and then they changed it. But, there was a lot of people that were like, you know what, we're done. Like, either they chose not to report it anymore or they just chose not to resell anymore, right? Because it was just Well, I'm going to spend more time dealing with paperwork than I am going to be reselling items. But the only reason you're doing that is because you're not organized. You're not consistent. You're not, I hate this word, disciplined. And I got to tell you that's in my own life. Like I spend right now, this September is heinous for me. It is terrible because my taxes are due October 15. Now, luckily, I do have my Reseller Genie, so let me just promote that real quick. My Reseller Genie is a great tool. It works in the background. It imports all my eBay listings, not my eBay listings, all my eBay fees, all my Poshmark fees, and it keeps it there, right? So even if I'm not consistently on my Reseller Genie, it takes care of things. It allows me to give, a profit loss. It allows me to give all this information to my tax person so I don't have to stress about it. And it's a great tool. And even if you're not using it for taxes, it allows you to keep track of your numbers. So my Reseller Genie is a software that is made by resellers for resellers. If you haven't checked it out yet, go to our link below and use our code Pure Hustle, and you'll get 15% off the first month. That is Pure Hustle, and you get 15% off the first month. And I'm telling you, it's going to be a lot easier to do bookkeeping once you get that in place. But yes, it can definitely consume you. And you might go like, oh, well, I didn't have to really deal with it in the summer. I didn't have to deal with it here. But I got to tell you, if let's say your taxes are due in April, and you spend a lot of time in February, and then you realize that you owe a ton of money, but the reason you owe money is because you didn't track your mileage, you didn't track your losses, you didn't find what you could deduct, you didn't track what your cost of goods were. Like, you're gonna find yourself going, oh man, this is so I'm telling you, it is so consuming. It is so consuming. I have been consumed by having to get everything ready for my taxes, because then you're fighting to try to keep every dollar that you made. But if you were on top of that before, you're going to find it very overwhelming. So make sure you get ahead of the curve when it comes to your bookkeeping. All right. So this one, I am half and half about. So
only half and half?
Yes, half and half. So let me explain. So we're going to talk here about like setting offers. Like, you can use templates and you can use the same template for your offers, but sometimes it's just better to allow eBay to automatically send that offer. Now, you know what's funny, Mike? I don't know, 3 weeks ago, do you remember what I said I wish eBay did on the app when it came to send offers? Do you remember that?
I'm not sure what you said. I don't remember.
Okay. So I had said it would have been nice if the eBay app just had everything like on one screen, right? Because it was annoying that you had to put send offer. It was annoying that you had to go to another screen to put your message. I was just like, this is a lot of work. And I said, hey, eBay, if you're listening, it'd be really nice, like, if you can kind of change this offer. And guess what? It's all on one screen now. Everything. So you can put the dollar amount, you can put your message, you can put, if you want to send the automatic, all the toggle switches on one page. So maybe eBay listened to us, or maybe it was just perfect timing. I'd love to know. I'd love to know. Maybe I'll ask one of the high ups. But here's the deal. You want to make sure that you toggle that one that says automatically send offers, because the reality is you're not always going to be able to send offers. eBay has been very clear that when the opportunity to send an offer comes up, it's because somebody has been closely monitoring your item for about 15 minutes, right? That could be that they put in your cart. That could be that they looked at it multiple times. That could be maybe they thought about sending an offer and then they didn't. It could be many things, but you're not going to be able to get to all of it, right? And I see a lot of people, like, sometimes I'll go on social media and they'll show a screenshot of their 90-day total, but under it, it's like 110 send offers. Like, they just haven't sent any offers at all. And you know what? If they had just set up their automatically send offer the first time, probably half of those would have been already gone instead of them feeling consumed. So make sure you do that. But do you do the auto accept where there's a threshold? Like, hey, it's just going to automatically accept this? Okay.
Yeah, I like auto accept. The reason I like auto accept is it just takes the guesswork out for me. Okay. If I know, like, when I do the listings, I already know, okay, I'm listing this item for $100. If somebody sent me an $80 offer, I'm going to take that offer, right? So I'm just going to set that, and I choose that as I'm as I'm doing the listing, because I'm most familiar with the comps at that moment. Sometimes you get an offer, you get an offer on an item that maybe you listed 7 months ago, and you're not sure. You're like, wait a minute, was this a hot selling item? Was it like, and you got to maybe do a little bit of research to figure out, okay, what are the current comps at? Whereas when I'm listing the item, I have the most familiarity with is this item a hot item? Do I have it priced right? I've done all the research on it right then. So if I set my auto offer then, I don't have to worry about it, right? Like I know I did that research back 7 months ago. So if I get that auto offer accept, I know that, hey, at that time that was a good deal. I was willing to take it then. I don't have to question and think to myself like, oh, maybe, and do a bunch more research now. So it definitely saves me a lot of time having that auto offer accept.
Okay. And I probably need to. You know what I mean? To be fair, like the reality is we all have in our minds what we're willing to accept. Now, sometimes we may accept a little bit less just because maybe it's a slow day, whatever it be. That's the only disadvantage. But I would say getting that set up is going to send you a lot of time. Even if you have templates and everything, it's still going to save you a lot of time. So I do encourage people to do that auto accept. Maybe I need to do more of that. All right, now let me ask you about this next one. Because I don't know how I felt about this. It's the whole idea. I wrote that just source items you know. Do you think that prevents you from reselling, consuming your life?
It can. It could also limit you from growth. So it's kind of a catch-22. So I would say limit what you're willing to learn in a year, right? If you're looking at the long term on this. So if you're saying, hey, I want to grow my business 10% year over year or 5% year over year, whatever the number is for you. And you say, I'm going to learn 2 new niches every year, or maybe just one. Like, I don't know a lot about, antique books, or I don't know a lot about pottery, or I don't know a lot about this. So I'm going to spend this year kind of learning this niche, figuring it out, getting into it. I think you should do that. I think you should constantly be growing and learning 1 or 2 new things each year. But then what that does is that over time, maybe you only started knowing like 3 things that you were decent at. Maybe you were good at jeans and women's shoes, and then you learned another niche. And over time, you slowly build. So by year 5, you've got like 15, 20 things you're now good at. So you're definitely going to save time. If you're just starting out, this is different. I feel like you're probably going to spend more time researching and learning than you are sourcing. But the longer you source, the more you're going to be able to stick with what you know, right? Like you can walk into a thrift store, or you could walk to a garage sale, walk around the garage sale, and spend half the amount of time that you would if you pick up every item you don't know and look it up. But once again, the longer you do something, the more you kind of get an eye for, I'm not going to look those things up because I just don't know about them. And I found 2 or 3 things here that are profitable. I'm going to stick with that. But if you see something really unique, you're like, you know what? I've been doing this for 3 or 4 years and I've never seen anything like this before. I'm going to spend an extra 10 minutes looking this up. I think that's a good thing to do. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you're trying to learn a ton of new categories every single time you're at a garage sale or a thrift store, you're going into new sections of the store, you're looking up things, and you're short on time, you're only hurting yourself. So if time is the thing, which was kind of what we're talking about here, not consuming yourself, if you're saying I need to somehow free up an extra 4 hours a week so that I have that family time, or so that I can focus on my 9 to 5, or so that I can get to the gym, then yeah, stick with what you know and limit what you're growing on. And over time, you're still going to have exponential growth.
I think that's the best way to say it, because I can tell you for myself, one of the worst things I've done before is I'll buy out a whole bunch of stuff that, I know, but it ends up consuming me because I don't list it, or I research one component and then I have to research more and I have to research more. And then I'm like, oh, like, why did I buy this? Right. I think we've all been there. Let us know in the chat, in the comments, if you've been there. Or I'll go to garage sale and I'll see something that's very valuable. Right. I'll look up the comps and I'm like, oh, this is worth something. But then I realize like I got to spend a ton of time testing it out. There's a big difference on model numbers or there's certain things you have to test. And so I don't have that knowledge. And so what ends up happening, I feel very overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my goodness, I bought like 5 of these units. I don't know anything about these items. And now I'm going to spend all this time. But for example, if you're a full-time reseller and you're just selling, say, vintage t-shirts, and you can really learn that really well, you're going to save yourself a lot of time, right? I would say the counter to me as an everything seller is everything seller can consume you. Like if you're not careful, you end up sourcing everything and you spend way more time researching than you actually spend listing, because you don't even know everything you picked up. You just put some keywords, you saw the comps, you're like, hey, it's worth it. But in the reality, if you have a ton of items like that, it may not be worth sourcing. And so you've really got to be careful because you don't want to feel overwhelmed by your death piles. You don't want to feel overwhelmed by a bunch of items that you don't even know how they work, what they are, and so on. And as I speak, I'm eyeing a bunch of things here that I'm like, probably should not have sourced those. I feel overwhelmed. So that's just how it goes, though. So, hey, real quick, one place that you can learn how to handle things quickly is in our Discord. So if you haven't checked out our Discord yet, jump on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/Pure Hustle Podcast. And for $5.55 a month, you can join our Discord. Some of our hustles of the week today that we're going to share here in a little bit come from our Discord. Great tool, a lot of resellers, very encouraging. And you know what? Talking about consuming your life, like I really believe the Discord saves a ton of time, because not only are you aware of bolos out there where you don't have to research, you just know this is valuable. You learn how to ship better. You learn how to source better. If you have something that you can't necessarily research, like there's others that can help you out with that. So you haven't checked out our Patreon yet, to get that Discord access, coming over Pure Hustle Podcast on Patreon. You can go to the link below and get set up. All right, are we ready to talk about some hustles of the week?
Yeah. Come on, hustlers. It's the freaking hustle of the week. Yeah. All right. Our first hustle of the week comes from the Discord. So Fresh Shells from the Discord says, I've been waiting for the 30-day return window to close before I shared. This is a little different for a hustle of the week, but I think it's worth sharing anyways. My kids used to play with these cars at my dad's house. He got them from thrifts and some retail stores, and it was time for them to go since the kids didn't care anymore. I originally listed them at $80 or best offer plus shipping, and I was totally ready to accept a $40 offer. They sat for 4 or 5 days with no views. At that point, I decided to end the listing and set up a 10-day auction. Ended up selling the lot of 49 die-cast and plastic cars, 2 and 3 for $98 plus shipping. Holy smoke. So you went from hoping to get 40, 80 was your original listing, and you ended up getting $98 plus shipping? That's bonkers. That's like, I think and that goes to show the benefit of auctions. I feel like I need to run a few more auctions on some things, because it creates that sense of urgency, right? I think it's probably promoted in the algorithm in a different way than just a regular, listed item. So I think that's not only is this like a cool hustle of the week, but it's also like an interesting strategy that I think might be worth trying for some people.
My favorite part of it is that all these kids played with it and they enjoyed it and they had fun with it, and then they sold it and they made profit on it still, like that's a win all around. You may have, you probably paid retail. They were probably 3 or 4 a piece. So, obviously there was a loss there, but the reality is there wasn't a loss, because you gained the value of it. They served their purpose, and now you can buy more toys with that money. I think I have a lot of Thomas toys. I have a lot of Cars toys that I have not reached into yet, that my kids have. Hey, listen, if you ever want to start reselling, you're listening to this, you're a parent, and you haven't, you have kids that are teenagers, it doesn't hurt to go into that toy closet and see what's there, because some of those items for like 10, 15 years ago, they're discontinued and there's value to them. So definitely check it out. All right. Mine comes from Secondhand Solo, one of my competition in San Diego. I run into this guy every once in a while. But a great guy, always funny. We always have a good time, even on the Discord. But this was interesting. So, you just never know. You'll end up, you drive by sometimes free stuff. Sometimes locally you see people have a pile of stuff. So this is something that was passed by. There was a bunch of free stuff that people would just put on the side of the road. And this ended up selling in less than 5 minutes after being listed. And this is actually a bolo. We're not doing bolos on this episode, but this is a free bolo. It's actually our bolo from the Discord. It's not from our Hustle of the Week thread. So I don't know if it's okay to share, but I've talked about this already before. So have you ever seen those magic jacks? Do you know what those are? Like, you're supposed to get like free long distance. So they used to be like those made for TV things.
Yeah, as seen on TV.
Seen on TV. So if you find these, like, people miss these all the time. I pick these up at estate sales a lot. The Magic Jack Plus. Now, they have to be sealed. If they're not sealed, you're not going to get a lot of money for it. But sold this one in less than 5 minutes for $60 free ship. Think about it, free to $60, and it's sold in less than 5. Like, that is, I got to tell you, I would love to have like 100 items that sell within 5 minutes, than 100 items that sell for like 600, or 6, I don't know, whatever. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather make that fast money so I can cash flow that into other things. Does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah, I think I get the spirit of what you were saying there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, fast is quick. I mean, of course, we'd all like that. I'd always love to get free stuff that sells fast for a lot of money. But that doesn't always happen, which is why that is a hustle of the week and a bolo. All right, our next one. I'm going to pull this one up. You sent the screenshot here to me. So this one comes from, and don't everybody laugh here. This comes from Tim the Slim. From our Discord, longtime listener and ongoing joke on the podcast that pretty much every episode there's a Tim the Slim shout out. And I'm going to be honest here. If anybody's going to complain about the fact that Tim the Slim is getting lots of shout outs, I'm going to say, come on over, join the Patreon, join the Discord, and provide as much like constant interactions and hustles as Tim the Slim is doing. I promise you're going to get on here a lot too. And even if you're not, we pretty much, if you send us an email, if you send us a phone call especially, you're for sure going to make onto the podcast as long as it's an appropriate hustle of the week. So, all right, without further ado here, without beating a dead horse, which goes into this one a little bit, Tim the Slim picked up a Plush Life 48-inch horse from Cowtoy. Not sure exactly what the makes them and sought after, but found this guy and one other black one like it at the bins for $1. So this is like a plush. So it's a rare Cowtoy paint horse plush, stuffed animal, and it was sold for $127.95 plus shipping, and the buyer paid like $40 in shipping for this thing. So that's bonkers. From $1 to $130. Wild. Like, that's just crazy. And I do the bins, and when I do the bins, I typically do hard goods, and that includes toys. And that just goes to show you can definitely make some money. There's stuff to be made at the bins besides just clothing. That's crazy.
No, I agree. Well, at least outside of San Diego, because over here it's terrible. Just terrible. Listen, Goodwill, if you're listening to me, Goodwill San Diego, get your act together. Go on YouTube. Type in Goodwill bins, and I promise you're going to go like, what are we doing? Like, we're terrible at what we do. We need to get our act together, because seriously, it is. Or you know what, Salvation Army, if you're listening and you want to get in the bin games, you can destroy Goodwill, and you can reach and help out so many more people by just introducing solid bins. I will be there. I will promote you guys. We'll make sure to make it happen, because I would love there to be some solid bins out here in San Diego. Okay, sorry, that was a little rant, but
I like it. All right,
so my
hustle of the week, man, it's been a long time since I've found some good camera stuff out in the wild. I mean, there's been some old stuff. You find some old like vintage, like Japanese lenses or various things that can be valuable. But I found something that is going back to that idea of sourcing what you know. I know Canon lenses a whole lot better than I know Nikon. I know Panasonic better than I know Nikon, but Canon is what I know the best. And so I'm specifically familiar with the Canon Rebel line, because that's what I first started shooting on. And I know that the Canon Rebel T3i is a pretty unique camera for as old as it is. I've sold several Canon Rebel line cameras, and they're basically like, the best way to describe it is it's like the Target version or like the Best Buy version of like the middle of the road camera. So it's a good DSLR, but it's not like your professional quality full frame camera that like if you're going to shoot weddings you're going to get. But if you're like getting into photography, these were good options back in the day. And I don't even know what the Rebels are up to now, but I remember last time I had a Rebel and bought some used Rebels. I think the T7i was probably like the most recent one that I had gotten. So they've had a lot of models since the T3. But the T3i is a pretty unique model, and I was able to pick it up with a handful of lenses as well. And what makes the T3i, without getting into a lot of details here, what makes it unique is it has some video features kind of built into it that all of the older or more recent models took out. Even though that the camera is capable of doing it, they took out the feature. And so a lot of people who do more like event videography, not like short things, but where they're like trying to record from long distances, the T3i is an incredible camera for that. And so I was able to pick up a camera and several lenses for $75. The camera itself will probably sell for like $150. It's in a good condition with low shutter count, but it also came with a handful of lenses. And again, I know Canon lenses pretty well, so I'm looking at probably another $120 to $150 with these lenses. So definitely a decent pickup, and exciting to see some things at a garage sale that I haven't seen in a long time, right? I still, to this day, haven't found in the wild for a good price L glass. So if you do see Canon lenses and you see one that has, actually, I take that back, because I have sold L glass for a different type of Canon camera, but not like the DSLR. But if you see a red rim around the outside of the lens, like there's like a ring that goes around the outside of the front of the, if you find one that's got that red rim, those are money. So if you can get your hands on one of those, you see that, don't pass it up for sure.
And now I'm thinking about, like, have I ever sold those? I never even looked at like what they were. I picked up lenses, I looked up comps, and I sell them. But yeah, there's a lot of money in lenses, especially if you know what you're doing. So, all right. So my hustle of the week, I love these hustle of the weeks, because it's always awesome when there's a bunch of resellers that had an opportunity to pick something up and they miss it, and then you get it and you're like, yes. So there's a garage sale here where it's a guy that he buys storage units, but he just doesn't want to sell on eBay. So he doesn't want to sell all of it on eBay. He picks what he thinks is best, and then he'll do like garage sales for the rest of it. Or he has like local buyers, which is kind of weird. I've given him my business card several times, but for a reason, he doesn't call me up, but he calls up other people. And he tells me, he's like, oh yeah, I just had somebody. I'm like, dude, why don't you tell me? Like, I'll show up, I'll buy. Well, there was a bunch of jerseys that were just sitting there. And one of the jerseys had some stains on it, but I've learned, how to take stains really easy. One of my tips is I use Clorox, those sanitizing wipes, and I sometimes those work. Sometimes I use Shout, and I'll spray Shout on it, and I'll use a sanitizing wipe, and I'll wipe it, or like scrub a little bit, and it comes out. It works. The third plan is, I put it in the wash, and I put OxyClean, and I let it soak for several hours, and sometimes that does the trick. So I knew with this that I could get these stains out. So I picked up this jersey with a bunch of other jerseys. I picked this one up for $1, and it was a Nike collaboration with Heron Preston. I don't know what that is. Maybe I should. Oversized football jersey, size 2XL. I paid $1 for it, and it sold within 2 weeks for $175 plus ship. So I'll take that any day. And it goes to show you that like people can always miss stuff. Just remember, as a reseller, like there's so much out there, so much opportunity. So I'll take $1 to $1.75 all day. So that was my hustle of the week. So thank you everyone for sharing your hustle of the week. Thanks for sharing us ways to stay motivated and inspired by not only sharing the hustle of the week, but sharing us the umbolos to keep an eye out for. All right, so let's talk a little bit about listing flow so you don't feel consumed. So what happens if you're an everything seller? Sometimes if you're new and no one's actually told you, or you never picked this up, like let's say you pick up a poster, and you pick up a pair of shoes, and you pick up a shirt, and you pick up, I don't know, a Christmas blow mold, right, for the lawn. And you might say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to list all of these I'm going to list all of these. Well, that's going to take you a lot of time, right? The shirt, you're going to have to do measurements and everything. The blow mold, if you want to show that the light works, you're going to have to plug it in. If you have a pair of shoes, you have to make sure they're clean and they're good. So all that is going to take time. What I recommend, what I do all the time is I won't list an item until I have like at least 5 of that item. Now, every once in a while, you can't do that. But for example, for me, like when it comes to clothing, I won't start listing clothing until at least I have 20 items, right? And by the way, the reason I say this is because I don't sell clothing anymore. I do a lot of collectibles, but if I do find a good deal on clothing, I'll pick it up, right? So once I have 20, it allows me to be really fast and efficient about it. When it comes to shoes, if I have, at least 5 to 10 pairs, I'll start listing those shoes because I just got to use the same light box. I use the same angles. it's really easy, right? When it comes to video games, right? Like if I have PlayStation, Nintendo, and Dreamcast, I'll just list a certain brand that I have, because then when I go my listings, things go a lot faster. So your listing flow allows you to be able to be efficient, so you don't feel overwhelmed with your listings and spending a bunch of time on them.
Yeah, that's good. And another thing that I've started doing is when I'm out at doing my sourcing, if I've already looked up an item, I'll do sell similar right there. If I'm putting an item in my cart at a thrift store, or if I'm at a garage sale and I find an item, I'll just do sell similar and create a draft. One of the things the draft won't save is the price. That's the biggest bummer, is it won't save the price. So sometimes I'll put it in the title, or I'll actually go in and click on that part and update the price with what I'm seeing comp selling for. But then the nice thing is I already have those drafts made. Then I come home, I take the pictures in my Lightbox and I upload those straight into the draft, and then I go onto my computer and add all the descriptions, and I do like 10 of those at a time, right? That is sped up my listing process significantly.
Yeah, I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah. All right. Another thing that's very useful is to take non-negotiable breaks, right? This could be short-term breaks, like if you're working on during a day, right? Like maybe Saturdays is your sourcing day and you're getting listings in at night. Give yourself a time, give yourself a lunch break, give yourself a break during the day and say, okay, this is the time I'm going to step away and detach from reselling for a little bit. Because oftentimes you think you're running at 100%, but when you're just like, you can get into zombie mode and not even realize it, or you're just slugging along. You're just kind of barely getting things done, but you're like, hey, I worked for 8 hours straight. But you really only did like 3 hours worth of legitimate work because you were just burnt. Like sometimes it's better to say like, all right, I'm going to work for 40 minutes straight. I'm going to take a 20-minute break. I'm going to go, eat something, watch something, do something else, go play with my kids, and then I'm going to get back. But then that same principle applies to longer term situations too, where you say, okay, Sundays are my day off, or every 2 weeks I schedule a time to, I don't know, go do something for you, right? Maybe it's fishing. Maybe it's going to get your nails done, or whatever it is. Like there's something that is like a you thing, do the whole Parks and Rec, treat yourself and take those breaks, take those times away from reselling. And you're going to go back into reselling ready to go. For me, it's the gym, right? Like I have a non-negotiable. I work out 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week. And no matter what else I let go, I'm not going to let that go because I know I function better throughout the day with that. And so taking those breaks away from reselling to do something for you, you're actually going to run more smoothly. Again, the problem though is some people take this too far and they end up taking an hour break for every 10 minutes of work they do. And that's not where you want to be.
That's pretty wild. No, and you need to stick to that break. Like for me, Sundays are my break. Like Sunday, I will not do any reselling until like 8 o'clock at night. And I've actually taken that to social media too. We used to Pure as a podcast. We used to post like 3 things on the feed, and maybe we need to do more of that again. But we used to post 3 on the feed. We used to have like 10 stories going every day. But it got crazy. It got too much along with the reselling, and so Sunday is a pretty hard and fast rule for me. Like I take that break, or else I'm gonna end up burning out if I don't take that break. Now this other one, if possible, you should look to hire somebody. Now, everybody has their own kind of rationale as to when to hire somebody. For me, it got to a place where I had so much inventory. The amount of time I would spend doing that inventory, I was losing money. So I ended up hiring somebody, and I hired that person. That person was able to get a bunch of drafts done. I think they were able to get like 8 to 10 drafts done every hour in the beginning, and they stepped up a little bit, 12 to 15. Some people hire a VA. They take all the pictures, they send it out to a VA. That's a virtual assistant that's maybe in another country, and that person does all the listings for them. And that will allow you not to feel overwhelmed, especially if you're someone that kind of wants to live a life where like reselling doesn't feel as active, like it's not something you got to do all the time, and you're able to, right? There's some things you just can't, right? Like I can't. There's some hard goods you may not be able to, some specialty items you may not be able to. But if you can find that opportunity and you feel that you would make enough money to cover that person and be more profitable, I would do it. There was a time for me in 2020 to 2021 where it was way more profitable for me to hire somebody because sales were way more consistent back then. And so for me to hire somebody and have them do all the listings was totally worth it. Now, eBay has been a lot of hit or miss, and it's just not worth it to me. But if you find that, your business is building and you want to scale, that may be a great tool for you.
That's good. So this next one is one that I find really important, and that is to clean your physical space. It is it is hard to quantify the amount of emotional and mental energy you're going to free up by having a clean, clutter-free work environment. When you have stuff everywhere, your brain is constantly, even if, obviously there's like the whole, ADHD and various things like that. But if you're looking at your desk and you're trying to get work done, and to your left is some pile of some stuff that is completely unrelated to the task you're working on, maybe a different desk pile than what you're working on. And then to your right is like your receipts that you're going to do on your taxes. And then you've got the area that you're going to be doing your pictures, and you've got some stuff in the way, and you got to spend time moving those things. And you're constantly moving something around. You have this weight that just weighs over you. Yep. I promise you, I remember this even as a kid, like I hated cleaning my room. Like my kids have to clean their room every night. Like their room is the exact same. It looks every day. Like by the time the night is over, it has to be put back perfectly. I did not grow up like that. I grew up in my room would get just destroyed over the course of weeks, like stuff everywhere. And then every once in a while, my parents would get upset enough, and it would be time, you are cleaning your room. And it would take hours of work. But by the time I was done, and sometimes, you get into that like mode where you're like, all right, and you get excited and you're actually dusting things and you're finding the perfect spot for everything in this drawer. And then that moment of looking around a perfectly clean room and you're like, this is amazing. Why don't I have it like this all the time? And it just feels great. And then over time, you slowly let it go again. I'm sure some of our listeners can relate to that. And when that is your current working environment, you're just not running optimally. You're just not. Like you might think you are, and that's the hard part. Is a lot of times you think like, oh, I'm doing just fine. Like my environment's messy. I only get 6 hours or 5 hours of sleep a night, and I'm running just fine. But the hard part is you're trying to base it off of what? Like you don't have anything necessarily to compare it to. But I can guarantee you, based off of all of the data that we have and science and all kinds of studies have shown, that if you're not getting enough sleep, if you don't have a clean environment, you're running suboptimally, and you don't even realize it because you've been running that way for so long that you don't realize you're running at a deficit. And so if you can, I promise you, just try it. Spend a day. Sometimes it takes that to like reorganize everything, get everything in order, get your tax paperwork done and put away and filed. And so you're not looking at it anymore, and get everything clean and organized. You're going to work far more smoothly. It's going to optimize your time. I promise you. Just clean your space. It is absolutely 100% worth it. I heard one person say one time, you can tell a lot about a person, like if they're going to be a good like employee, or like what kind of worker somebody is, or what kind of entrepreneur someone is, by looking at their closet and their car, right? Like if those spaces are like, or are neat and put together and organized and ready to go, then that's how they live their whole life. Like even the way they plan things, their schedule. And if you look at their closet and their car and things are a mess, and I get that, some of us have different workflows, so it doesn't have to look the same for everybody, but you probably can say, well, my schedule kind of also looks the same. I don't keep like a tight schedule. It probably matches pretty closely to the way you organize other areas in your life that are unrelated to the thing that you're trying to evaluate.
That's too funny, because my closet and my car are always organized and clean, but nothing else. So I don't know what that says. So no, my living room's good, and my dining room's good, and my kitchen's good, but it's just kind of funny. It's just kind of funny to me. All right, hey, so this last one, and I know this is tough for a lot of people to hear, but if you feel really overwhelmed with reselling, sometimes it's just good to step away for a little bit, right? If you're part-time, especially if you can do it part-time, like it's okay. Step away for a month. Step away for 2. I remember back in the day, we had an episode similar to this a few years ago, and somebody had said, I can't take it anymore. I got reselling stuff I've sourced everywhere. It's on my dining room table. It's in my kitchen. It's in my living room couch. It's in my bedroom. It's in my bathroom. And it's consumed me. And I'm not a hoarder yet, but you might think I'm a hoarder because I have reselling stuff everywhere. And I tell people, like, hey, you know what? Sometimes it's okay. If you're part-time and you have a full-time job that pays all the bills, it's okay to step away a little bit. Maybe reset a little bit. Maybe, have a huge like flash sale and sell all that stuff off and maybe start all over, right? If you're full-time, this is a tough one, right? Because with full-time, like, the whole goal of full-time, it's funny because everybody has a different reason for being full-time. I was just talking to somebody who was an educator earlier this week, and they're like, I retired. Like, I'm never going back to the classroom, right? And so for some people, like, giving up reselling is really tough. Then there's people like me where, like, I see this as a vehicle. Like, Craigslist Hunter had asked me back in year one, like, how long do I intend on doing this? And I said, I don't know, 5 years at the least. And then after that, who knows? But there have been some times where I completely had to step away as full time. Now, I was okay with that because I had money saved and I had enough listings and I had drafts ready to go. And my VA could just hit those drafts, and I was able to step away for a whole week, not think about reselling. And when I came back, I was fully recharged. And sometimes that's what it takes. Or sometimes it just takes, saying, hey, you know what? Being a full-time reseller has consumed too much of my life. I don't find purpose. I don't find like I'm making a change in anything. Maybe I need to go back to something that I enjoyed more, and maybe I cut it down to part-time. And you might find that you're really successful as a part-time reseller, and that full-time, it was good for a while, but you realize that you only have so much that you're willing to give for being a full-time reseller, and it's okay. It's okay to step away. I know. I listen, on YouTube, it's always like, oh, this person was a full-time reseller, now they're back to work and so on. But you know what I find is most of those people, when I DM them or I reach out to them, we talk, they're like, hey, Orlando, reselling was great. I really loved it. But I think it was only for a time. Like, I think I needed a break at that time. Maybe you have small kids and you want to spend more time with your small kids. Maybe you're going through a different life scenario. Maybe, the place you're working at was real toxic, and reselling gave you an avenue to escape that toxicity. And now you're ready to get back into another place that isn't toxic and be able to continue to find what is valuable to you. So sometimes, so you're not consumed by reselling. It does take stepping away. And I know that's really hard for some people to hear.
Yeah, but that's good. I think you said what needed to be said there. And just realize your work should be benefiting you, right? It should be helping your life be better, whether that's financially, time-wise. And if you ever get to a place where work is making your life worse, then you got to figure something out. So I think that's good.
You mean reselling can make people's life worse?
It can, right?
I know it can.
I mean, it can.
No, it really can. But the reality is reselling does a lot more good. And it's done a lot of good for people. And if you watch and listen to all our episodes, reselling it is a life changer for so many people in so many ways. So continue reselling, continue finding those deals, but make sure that it doesn't consume you. And with that being said, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling.